So I want to put together a couple of Bible verses and explain why it is our mind is like a game. Okay, a very specific game that I'll let you guess at in a second. But first I'm going to go through the Bible verses. James 1, 5 through 8. It says, "If any of you lacks in wisdom, ask God, who gives generally to all without reproach, and it will be given to you. But ask in faith, with no doubting. For the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. That person must not suppose he will receive anything from the Lord, for he is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways." Please remember that. Double-minded. Okay? Double-minded man, unstable in all his ways. In 2 Corinthians 10:5, it says, "Hold all of your thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ." Now remember, double-minded man, hold your thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ. Well, Christ, in the form of Jesus, in Matthew 6:25, says, "Take no thought for your life." He says that a whole lot, too. Take no thought, take no thought. The Buddha teaches so much about how we're not our thoughts. As a mental health therapist, I've learned over time that we usually bombard ourselves with thoughts that cause us a lot of pain. And I realize when we somehow get behind that and we detach from our thoughts, we feel better. So how do we pull that all together? Double-minded man, a teaching to hold your thoughts captive to the obedience of Christ, and then the man Christ himself saying to take no thought for your life. So how can we pull that together? So here's the game that is your mind. Does that look like anything? Now I'm going to speed it up for those on the internet. This is Plinko. Do you recognize Plinko? Okay, this is Plinko. Now, it's bad drawing of Plinko, but that's what it is. So how does Plinko work? You drop a coin in a slot at the top, and as it falls in and hits these pins, it'll bounce this way or it'll bounce that way, and then you end up with a variety of outcomes. You know, $10 million, $1, good, great, or great, okay, bad, you know? Whatever you consider to be good, great, and bad. So, you'd think that where you drop the coin might have an influence as to where it ends up, right? Where would most people think if they want a great outcome? Where to drop the coin? On this side, right? Let's put it over here. Is that how it works? Have you seen Plinko? Mm-hmm. Does it work like that? Mm-mm. No, because you might drop it here and it goes plink, 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 right over there in that bad outcome. Ah. Now you'd think that if you just dropped it in here, it would go there. It doesn't always. See, our thoughts are like that. See, these pins here are like what our thoughts are. We don't control them. They just surface. Now, they surface in the direction of something, okay? And we're going to talk about that, these verses, with this Plinko game. If I wanted to influence having a great outcome, what could I do to the board to influence a great outcome?
Take out the pegs.
Well, there's two things. What are you saying? Okay, we're going to do what you, Stacy, you're going to say that last. That's excellent. Okay. Virgie, what'd you say?
Tilt it this way.
Tilt it, okay? See, now if I tilt it and I put a coin here, what's going to happen? Blinkety blink, 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 right? It's not going to go this way. And the more I tilt it, the more likely it's going to stay on this side. I just tilt it a little bit, maybe not as much. But if I tilt it like this, it can go a long way. So here's the double mind. This slot is the spirit mind. I'm going to write like a waitress. I respect their skills. How about that? And this is the ego mind. There's your double mind. Spirit, flesh, okay? And so you always have two slots. And these thoughts are just going to appear all over the board somewhere. And sometimes they're going to be bad thoughts, so to speak, sometimes good thoughts. Some are like shame and guilt, and some are I'm awesome, and you know, they're all over the board. You're not those thoughts. You're the person who decides which slot to put it in. Well, it's random practically if you're a double-minded man. If you can't pick, but what am I? Am I a soul? Am I an ego? Am I a physical being? Am I a spiritual being? If you ping-pong back and forth like that, you're like James says, a double-minded man being tossed to and fro, right? Many people on earth tilt the board like this, okay? They're all about looking at the world from the ego-flesh point of view. John 6:63, the flesh counts for nothing, okay? Meanwhile, most people go, well, I'm just going to go ahead and tilt all my thoughts in that direction. And then once you put it in over here, blink, 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 and you end up with what you'd call a bad outcome. Oh, you might occasionally get a good one, but you've just stacked the deck against yourself. Hence we suffer when we look at ourselves like this. Jesus, as the Savior, says, tilt the board this way. Look at yourself this way. Seek first the kingdom of heaven, and all the rest will be added to you. And now your thoughts will be different. They'll change. Instead of some thoughts that orient towards bad outcomes, you're going to have thoughts orient towards greater outcomes because you've tilted the board. What's 2 Corinthians 10:5? Hold your thoughts captive to the obedience to Christ. Well, if I'm supposed to take no thought for my life, well, he's talking about this ego life, right? Shift all your thoughts to the spiritual life. If you're going to have them captive to the obedience of Christ. Here's the trick. What if you don't believe in Christ? What if you don't believe in the spiritual world? What if you only believe in what you can see? Oh, look, it's a physical world. Tilt. And if that's all you can see, that's the thoughts you're going to have as a result. And they're going to be all over the board, ultimately leading towards a bad outcome. But if you tilt it in this direction, and you're like, blessed are those who believe without seeing, and now that you know, and there's a Christ within me, once you have that belief, and you're convicted in that belief, your thoughts are going to be different as a result. You don't even have to try. They're just going to surface naturally, differently, because you're going to see the world spiritually. Simply enough, if you're in traffic, you're going to see a bunch of cars. And you're going to feel stressed because you're impatient and you're going to be late if you're looking at it from the ego point of view. But the exact same traffic from the spiritual point of view is like, look, opportunity to practice patience. I can accept. I can do nothing about this. Now all of a sudden you get a different feeling called patience, which is a spiritual thing. See people as bodies when they die, you have a totally different feeling than when you see them as souls when they die. Your thoughts will be different as a result. Instead of the type of tremendous grief we often have when we see someone as physical, you can have a liberating, not happy necessarily, but certainly a liberating, more peaceful feeling when someone dies, and you see yourself and them as spirit. This works with everything that we do. Now that's the essence of holding your thoughts captive to the obedience, because if you go this way, that's obedient to Christ, and your thoughts will go in that direction for sure. The take no thought aspect of it helps with what you said, Stacy. Now, what if I wanted a great outcome and I were able to eliminate these little pegs, right? On this side of the board. Now what can I do with the coin? Watch. Right? This is what happens when we calm our mind and we're able to shut up our mind. This is what meditation does and breathing techniques. We actually make some of these thoughts disappear. There's less clutter on the board. You know, the anxious person or the ego-filled person's board looks like this. Good luck controlling outcomes when you drop the coin in here. It's going to go plinkety, plinkety, plink. In some cases, people's thoughts are so bad, the coin will just stop, right? Well, what if you orient all your thoughts like in this direction, and you're able to eliminate by calming your mind and being more meditative? Because you can't get rid of all your thoughts. Buddhists say that too. It's like, you can't stop thinking. You're going to think. But if we orient ourselves in that Christ-like direction, I can actually set up a board that looks something pretty much like this. I don't care where I drop it. It's still going to clink over into this section. So the last thing is, what do you call great? Can you improve your golf game with this type of thinking? Yes. The more relaxed and patient you are over a putt, the more likely it's going to go in. The more you're shooting a free throw with confidence and fearlessness, the more it's going to go in. When you're on a job interview, for sure, if you are confident, cool, collected, all that kind of stuff, you're more likely to get hired. If you're nervous about things, of course, you're more likely to have a negative outcome. That makes sense. But that's not the ultimate goal of this. Now, to be dramatic, because I'm not a big fan of hell, as it's often taught, neither is the Pope. I'm glad he joined the club on that one. Well, the Pope said there's no hell, not the way we think, which is totally true. Anyhow, bad outcomes is what happens to you spiritually if you're looking at the board like this. If you're looking at the world from an ego point of view, will you grow in that regard? It's going to take a long time. You might even put yourself in hell. That's what I'd call a bad outcome. The good outcome is going, I'm going to stick with it. Part of that verse, or the end of the verse, the James 1:5, I think it's James 1:12, he says, blessed are those who remain steadfast under trial, for they shall receive the crown of God. See, that's a great outcome, right? Remaining steadfast in spite of all your trials and tribulations. You just shifted the board like this. If stuff happens to you and you don't like it and you lose your nerve, oh, this is terrible, I don't like this. Yeah. You just emphasize the ego side of things, and you're not trusting anymore. But when you trust, you shift the board this direction. Blessed are those who remain steadfast, you shall receive the crown of God. To me, that is a great outcome.